Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're stepping onto the construction site, you might say. We're taking a look at an industry that's constantly shaping the world around us, construction.
That's right. And it's funny, you think about it, the roads you use, the buildings where you work, where you live, even the parks. It's
Hmm.
all construction.
Yeah, you really only notice it when there's like a detour or hammering next door, right?
Exactly. But behind those, temporary fences, there's this huge, incredibly complex world operator.
Totally. It sounds simple, maybe putting stuff together, but the scale is just staggering. The economic side of it, we're talking, what, over $1 trillion spent every year just in the U.S.?
A trillion. Yeah, it's a number that's almost hard to really picture.
And that money, that $1 trillion, it fuels a massive job market too.
Oh, completely. You've got over 7 million people directly working in construction. And then think about all the others. People making the materials, designing the buildings, driving the trucks, so many more indirectly.
It really feels like it's kind of the backbone of a lot of the economy.
It really is. And you see that clearly when things slow down. The source material we looked at points to the Great
You're
Recession,
right.
but the industry shrank by 30%. That's huge.
30%.
Yeah.
What did that actually mean, like longer term? What were the ripples from that?
Well, losing that many skilled workers, it created real problems down the line. We saw labor shortages, maybe a slower recovery in building because the workforce just wasn't there.
Hmm.
When a whole sector shrinks like that, it hits everything. The supply chains, investment, just the general pace of development. It takes a long time to build that capacity back up.
Hmm.
The chapter mentions even by mid-2016, so years later, the industry was still short about 1 million workers compared to before the recession. And the value, it dropped from like 1.32 trillion in 2008.
Wow, so it really underlines that a healthy construction industry isn't just, nice new buildings. It's a sign of the whole economy's health.
Definitely.
So, okay, our mission today is to really dig into the nuts and bolts, maybe the steel beams and concrete of this industry.
Yeah, let's unpack it. What is construction, really? Who are the main players? What kinds of projects do they do? And what makes this industry so, well, unique?
Exactly. We're drawing from chapter about one, the construction industry for
Right.
this. So, okay, first question, the big picture definition. What is construction?
Well, in essence, it's the whole complex process of creating and then also maintaining the built environment around us.
The built environment. So buildings, roads.
Everything tangible, yeah. Houses, parks, transportation networks like roads and subways, the energy infrastructure like power plants, water systems. It's the physical stuff of society.
And it's not just the crew pouring concrete, is it? It sounds like this massive network.
Oh, absolutely. You've got designers, architects, engineers, then regulatory officials checking codes, estimators figuring out costs, spec writers detailing every single material,
Suppliers bring in the stuff.
suppliers, and
Yeah.
then, yeah, the skilled tradespeople actually putting it all together. It's a real web of collaboration.
It's easy to forget how many pieces there are, even for something that looks small from the outside.
For sure.
The source says even like a relatively simple project needs planning, design, getting materials, the actual building work, scheduling everything,
Budgeting, finance,
getting permits, that whole side of it.
that's such a key point. Every single project, big or small, is like conducting a mini orchestra. All these parts have to work together.
Right.
And then when you scale that up to, say, a huge infrastructure project or skyscraper, the complexity just goes through the roof. The money involved, the time it takes, the sheer number of people. It's massive.
And for the companies doing the work, the contractors, it sounds like they're walking a tightrope a lot of the time. Lots of potential problems.
They really are. The chapter lists quite a few risks they face constantly. Things like sudden spikes in material costs, wood, steel, whatever.
Now that happens.
Finding enough skilled workers, that's a perennial challenge. Discovering weird stuff in the ground once you start digging.
Uh-huh.
Building codes, changing mid-project, deliveries getting delayed. Sometimes the local community raises concerns.
And weather. Can't forget weather.
Oh, yeah. Weather's always a big one. It messes with schedules, budgets, everything.
It definitely paints a picture of something way more dynamic and maybe riskier than you'd think just driving past a site.
Absolutely.
So, okay, who are the main companies actually making this happen? What kinds of construction firms are out there?
Well, the industry's really diverse. You've got everything from like a single person working as a contractor on small jobs,
Right.
all the way up to these huge multinational corporations. The chapter mentions Skanska and Turner Corporation companies that build those massive mega projects, the ones that change skylines.
Makes sense. You need different scales for different jobs.
Hmm.
And it says they tend to specialize based on how complex the project is.
Yeah, that specialization is really important
Hmm.
because the skills you need, the equipment, the rules and regulations, even just the knowledge base,
Hmm.
it can be totally different depending on what you're building.
So a bridge builder isn't necessarily building hospitals.
Exactly. Or, the company building tract homes probably isn't set up to handle a complex industrial plant with all its specialized systems.
Got it. Now, the chapter talks about three main types of contractors: general contractors, GCs, specialty trade contractors, or subs, and construction management contractors, CMs. Let's start with GCs. What's their main job?
Okay, so the general contractor, the GC, they're usually hired by the owner. Their main responsibility is to oversee and complete all the physical construction work.
So they're the main point person, the coordinator.
Pretty much. They make sure everything comes together according to the plans and the schedule. They might focus on new builds or renovations, but yeah, overall management is key.
And they typically come in after the design is mostly done.
That's the common way, yes. Now, it's important to remember, even though the GC is responsible for all the work,
They don't usually do it all themselves, right?
right, they often hire others for big chunks of it.
Which brings us to the specialty trade contractors,
Yeah.
the subcontractors.
Exactly. These are the experts in specific areas. Plumbers, electricians, the folks who install fire sprinklers, HVAC systems, you name it.
All the specialized trades.
Yeah. The GC hires these subcontractors to handle the parts of the job that need their specific skills and knowledge. And on really big projects, sometimes those subs even hire their own smaller, even more specialized subs.
So the GC is like the orchestra conductor, and the subs are the players on specific instruments.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
Okay, what about the third type? Construction management contractors, CMs. How are they different?
CMs often get involved much earlier, sometimes right at the beginning during planning and design.
Oh, okay.
They act more like the owner's agent or advisor. They bring construction expertise to the table early on, thinking about costs, buildability, what's actually practical.
Instructability, yeah.
Right. They help the owner choose the GC, maybe even the specialty contractors. They manage the contracts, oversee the money side, all for the owner.
So they're helping the owner navigate the process.
Exactly. And sometimes the CM firm might actually become the GC later, or they might just help the owner hire a separate GC.
So more of a strategic partner for the owner,
Yeah.
especially early on. Makes sense. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The chapter also divides the industry into different sectors. Four main ones: residential, commercial, institutional, industrial, and infrastructure. Let's start with residential.
Okay, residential. Pretty straightforward. It's about building and renovating places where people live.
Houses, apartments.
Single-family homes, townhouses, bigger apartment buildings, condos, yeah. And it's a big chunk of the industry, apparently around 40% of the total value each year.
40%.
Wow.
What defines these projects typically?
Well, usually they're wood frame construction, generally seen as less technically complex than, say, a hospital or a power plant.
Right.
Architects are often involved in the design, maybe working with engineers. And an interesting thing is, while the market is usually very local, the materials and sometimes even the workers can come from all over the world. This sector also has lots of smaller GCs and specialty contractors, and it's mostly funded by private money.
Okay, lots of local players, private investment.
Sure.
Got it. Next is commercial institutional. What falls under this?
It's a pretty broad category. Commercial includes things used for business office buildings, big apartment complexes, shopping malls, theaters.
Retail entertainment.
Right. And then institutional covers more nonprofit or public service type buildings. Think churches, schools, universities, hospitals, museums.
So a mall is commercial, a library is institutional.
Exactly. And generally, these projects are more complex than residential ones.
What makes them more complex?
Usually more advanced materials, more sophisticated systems. Think about the complex electrical or HVAC systems in a big office building or hospital.
Yeah. Oh.
This needs more specialized designers and builders. And while a lot of commercial work is private, a key thing on the institutional side is that many projects are publicly funded.
Schools, government buildings.
Right, and that often means extra rules, more oversight, especially about how contractors are picked and often requiring fixed prices, more red tape sometimes.
More red tape, public money. Okay. Then we have the industrial sector. What's that about?
Industrial projects are all about the process happening inside. So oil refineries, power plants, chemical plants, big factories.
So the building itself is secondary to what it does.
Pretty much. The focus is heavily on installing specialized equipment efficiently, the layout for the industrial process. These are usually highly technical, very specialized projects.
And who builds these? Who designs them?
Typically privately owned and financed. And because they're so technical, you need really close cooperation between the designers, who are usually engineers with very specific expertise.
Not architects as much here.
Less so, generally engineers lead the design. And the builders need specialized knowledge, techniques, often specific licenses too.
Okay, super technical, engineer-driven, focused on function. Got it. Lastly, infrastructure. Roads and bridges come to mind immediately.
Exactly. Infrastructure covers all those essential public service projects: roads, highways, bridges, tunnels, mass transit like subways.
Airports, ports.
Yep. Airports, ports, water supply, sewer systems. It's often called heavy civil or horizontal construction.
Horizontal, right, because it spreads out more than up.
Kind of, yeah. Like industrial, these are mainly designed by engineers, and the builders need special licenses and skills. A big thing here is that these are often really long-term projects, often publicly owned, and can take years, even decades, from the first idea to completion.
Decades. The chapter uses the San Francisco Bay Bridge East Span replacement as an example. That took ages.
It's a perfect case study. The original bridge in the 30s needed permits from just one agency.
Wow.
The replacement, 13 different federal, state, and local agencies involved.
13. Why so much more complex?
Well, think about it. Much stricter building codes, completely near earthquake safety rules, a huge focus on worker safety that wasn't there before, lots of public input.
Conflicting demands,
Yeah.
probably.
Often, yeah. And just the cost escalating over such a long time. It really shows how these huge infrastructure projects are beasts of their own.
Definitely. So looking back across all these residential, commercial, industrial infrastructure, are there common threads, defining characteristics for the whole industry?
Yes, the chapter highlights a few key ones. First, and maybe the biggest, every single construction project is unique, a one-off.
Every single one.
Fundamentally, yes. Second, each one happens at a specific unique location with its own ground conditions, its own challenges.
All right.
And third, almost every time it's a different client, a new team, designers, engineers, contractors, subs, all coming together just for that one project.
That sounds like it could create some real challenges. It's not like a factory, same team, same place, same product over and over.
Exactly. That constant churn, new teams forming for each unique project in a unique place, it leads to what the chapter calls a fragmented industry.
Fragmented.
Yeah.
And that makes things harder.
Well, the suggestion is it can make it harder to, say, spread innovation or establish consistent best practices across the board. How do you build deep collaboration when the teams are always changing? It's apparently something the next chapter gets into more.
Interesting. A bit of a teaser there. Okay, so let's quickly recap this deep dive into Chapter 1. We've defined construction, looked at its huge scope.
Right. The different types of companies involved, from small GCs to the giant multinationals and the subs and CMs.
And we broke down those four main sectors: residential, commercial, institutional, industrial, and infrastructure, and what makes each one tick.
And hopefully really driven home just how vital this industry is, economically and just for, how we live our lives.
Which leads us perfectly to a final thought for you, the listener. The source material has these topics for discussion, and one really jumped out at me.
Oh, yeah.
It asks you to think about how that very uniqueness we just discussed, every project being different place, different team, how that might create both challenges and maybe even opportunities for innovation and efficiency.
Interesting angle. Challenges are obvious, but opportunities.
Right. So thinking about that, what do you see as the real difficulties in building like strong long-term collaboration or sharing knowledge effectively when everything's so temporary and project-based?
It's definitely something to chew on as you look at the buildings and roads around you.
Yeah, good question to ponder.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.